Everyone aboard died in 120 seconds. All 109 people on Air France Flight 4590 were dead before the evening news. The Concorde, the world's only supersonic passenger jet, became a 180-ton fireball over Paris on July 25, 2000. The cockpit voice recorder captured every scream. Captain Christian Marty had just 90 seconds from the moment of ignition to the moment of impact. He never had a chance. The plane was traveling at 200 miles per hour when the left wing exploded into flames. Witnesses at Charles de Gaulle Airport saw a trail of fire half a mile long. The Concorde climbed to only 200 feet before it fell from the sky. It crashed into the Hotelissimo in Gonesse, killing 4 more people on the ground. The entire passenger manifest was German tourists headed to New York for a cruise. They paid $500 each for a ticket. What they got was a front row seat to their own deaths. But here's what nobody knew in those first hours. This wasn't a freak accident. It was the final domino in a chain that started months before takeoff. And the first domino was a piece of metal smaller than your hand. The Concorde was aviation royalty. Only 20 were ever built. British Airways and Air France split them. A round trip from Paris to New York cost $2,000 in 2000. Celebrities, CEOs, and royalty filled every flight. The plane could cross the Atlantic in 3 hours and 30 minutes. Twice the speed of sound. Mach 2. No other passenger jet came close. The Concorde had flown for 24 years without a single fatality. It was the safest commercial aircraft in history. Until it wasn't. Flight 4590 was a charter. A German tour company called Peter Dielman Cruises booked the entire plane. The passengers were mostly retired couples from Mönchengladbach, Germany. They arrived at the airport excited. This was the trip of a lifetime. Supersonic flight to New York, then a luxury cruise to Ecuador. Captain Christian Marty was 54 years old. He had 13,477 flight hours. His co-pilot, Jean Marcotte, had 10,035 hours. Flight engineer Gilles Jardinod completed the crew. They were among the most experienced pilots in the Air France fleet. Only 7 captains were certified to fly the Concorde. Marty was one of the best. The plane itself was registration FBTSC. It had been in service since 1975. It had flown 11,989 hours. Maintenance records showed it was airworthy. But there was something nobody checked that morning. The plane was overweight. Luggage exceeded limits by 2,200 pounds. The center of gravity was off by 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter. That sounds like nothing. It would mean everything. What the crew didn't know was that their plane was already compromised before they even started the engines. A critical component was missing from the landing gear. And on the runway ahead, a piece of metal was waiting. At 4:42 p.m., Flight 4590 began its takeoff roll on runway 26R. The Concorde needed to reach 225 miles per hour to lift off. The engines roared. All 4 Rolls-Royce Olympus engines at full throttle. The plane accelerated. 100 miles per hour. 150, 180. At 4:43 p.m., the front left tire hit something on the runway. A metal strip. 17 inches long. 1.1 inches wide. It weighed 2 pounds. The strip had fallen off a Continental Airlines DC-10 that departed 5 minutes earlier. Continental maintenance had installed the strip incorrectly. It wasn't even the right part. The DC-10 used a non-standard repair that violated manufacturer specifications. But here's the thing. That metal strip should not have destroyed a Concorde. The tires were supposed to withstand debris strikes. They were tested. Certified. Approved by French aviation authorities. But what nobody knew was that Air France had switched tire suppliers in 1993. The original tires were made by Dunlop. The new tires were made by Michelin. The Michelin tires were lighter. Cheaper. But they had a critical flaw. They were more susceptible to rupture. And there was something else. The Concorde had a known problem. If a tire burst, debris could puncture the fuel tanks. This had happened before. 5 times between 1979 and 2000, Concordes had tire blowouts that punctured fuel tanks. British Airways installed Kevlar liners in their tanks after a 1979 incident. Air France did not. They said it wasn't necessary. They were wrong. When the tire hit the metal strip, it exploded. A 9-pound chunk of rubber flew upward at 310 miles per hour. It hit the underside of the left wing. The impact ruptured fuel tank number 5. 300 gallons of jet fuel poured out in seconds. The fuel ignited. The left wing became an inferno. Captain Marty saw the fire warning light. Engine 2 lost power. Then engine 1 failed. The fire was so intense it melted the aluminum wing structure. The plane was now traveling at 200 miles per hour. Too fast to stop. Not fast enough to fly safely. The tower radioed, "You have flames. You have flames behind you." Marty's response was calm. "Roger." Too late to abort. They were committed. But what happened next made survival impossible. The Concorde lifted off at 4:44 p.m. It was airborne. But it was already dying. With engines 1 and 2 failing and the left wing on fire, the plane couldn't climb. It reached 200 feet and stopped gaining altitude. The flight engineer tried shutting down engine 2 to contain the fire. That made it worse. Now only 2 engines were producing thrust, both on the right side. The plane banked left. Marty fought the controls. The Concorde was the most sophisticated passenger jet ever built. It had 275,000 parts. Every single one had to work perfectly at supersonic speeds. One failure could cascade into catastrophe. That's exactly what happened. The investigation later revealed something shocking. A titanium spacer was missing from the left main landing gear. This spacer was supposed to keep the bogie aligned during retraction. Without it, the landing gear didn't fold properly. When Marty tried to retract the gear after takeoff, it jammed. The gear doors stayed open. This created massive drag on the left side. The plane couldn't accelerate. Couldn't climb. The missing spacer had been noted in maintenance logs 3 weeks earlier. The mechanic wrote that it should be replaced. But the paperwork got lost. The Concorde flew for 3 more weeks with a critical component missing. Nobody checked. Nobody followed up. This wasn't incompetence. This was systemic failure. Air France had been cutting costs. Maintenance budgets were slashed. The Concorde was expensive to operate. It burned 5,638 gallons of fuel per hour. It needed constant upkeep. Management pushed for faster turnarounds. Corners were cut. Now everyone aboard was paying the price. The cockpit voice recorder captured the final moments. Marty to air traffic control, "We're trying for Le Bourget." Le Bourget Airport was 4 miles away. They never made it. At 4:44 and 31 seconds, the plane's airspeed began to drop. The fire had burned through hydraulic lines. The flight controls stopped responding. The plane rolled left. More than 100 degrees. It was inverted. The nose dropped. What the passengers experienced in those final seconds is almost unimaginable. The cabin filled with smoke. The plane shook violently. People were thrown against the walls. The fire burned through the fuselage. Some passengers were still strapped in their seats when rescuers arrived. Others had been thrown clear on impact. All were dead. The Concorde hit the Hotelissimo Hotel at 4:44 and 56 seconds. The impact speed was 400 miles per hour. The fireball was visible for miles. Everyone aboard died instantly. 4 hotel workers also died. The entire crash sequence, from tire burst to impact, lasted 120 seconds. 2 minutes. That's all it took to end the Concorde era. The investigation took 16 months. French authorities initially blamed the metal strip. They charged Continental Airlines with criminal negligence. A Paris court convicted Continental and one of its mechanics in 2010. Continental was fined $20,000. The mechanic was given a 15-month suspended sentence. But the court also found Air France partially responsible. The missing spacer. The overweight luggage. The failure to install Kevlar liners. These weren't acts of God. They were choices. Cost-cutting choices. The Concorde fleet was grounded immediately after the crash. British Airways and Air France tried to resume service in 2001. They installed fuel tank reinforcements. They replaced the tires. But passenger confidence was gone. The economics never worked again. After September 11, 2001, luxury air travel collapsed. The Concorde's final flight was on November 26, 2003. The supersonic dream died with Flight 4590. Today, there is no supersonic passenger jet. We fly slower now than we did in 2000. Several companies are trying to build new supersonic planes. Boom Supersonic, Ariane, Spike Aerospace. They all promise safety and speed. But they face the same problem the Concorde did. Physics doesn't forgive shortcuts. Neither does fire. The families of the 113 victims received settlements. Air France paid 50 million total. Continental paid another 0 million. No amount of money brings anyone back. The Concorde crash proved something the aviation industry didn't want to admit. Even the most advanced technology is only as safe as the humans maintaining it. One missing spacer. One wrong tire. One piece of metal on a runway. That's all it takes. Speed kills when safety fails. And somewhere right now, at an airport you might fly from tomorrow, a mechanic is making a choice. Is the investigation really over, or did the authorities miss an even darker pattern in the Concorde's maintenance records? Subscribe for a new dark truth every day.